or with Dad for house calls there, and Mr. Ward at one point had fallen into the well.
Oh no!
And but there was the wood, and so he had stopped. He was down there for a while, and so they had to bring him out and deal with that. But Mrs. Ward would sit around, serve tea to us around their big dining room table, and well, the rest of where Dad would go off and do his doctor stuff with Mr. Ward and with their son Sink Ward, and now that's a historic. The whole house has been totally restored as part of this old Stewart farmhouse. So it's neat to have the connections that where it is today and where it was then, and the experiences we got to have riding around with Dad. There was another story. There was a place called Redwood Park out just off 16th Avenue, which was the Brown brothers had planted all these redwood trees, and they had grown all these wonderful trees. And today it is a park. It's owned by the city of Surrey now. But I remember Dad was asked. They lived in a tree house, on this place. They were quite eccentric, the two Brown brothers, and one of them had fallen out of the tree, and they were getting older and couldn't climb up in the treehouse and had broken his leg. So that their sister, who had lived up, I think, on about 20th Avenue, had phoned Dad and said, "Can you come and see my brother? He's fallen out of the tree and he's injured, but don't go there on your own. You've got to come and see me first." So he went to see the sister, and she walked Dad down to the tree house, which is still there. They've got a replica of the treehouse in the park, and he was greeted by one of the brothers with a shotgun, saying, "What are you doing here?"
Yeah.
So the sister said, "No, it's okay," and Dad attended to them, and then whatever the bill was that was sent out from his office, they said it was ridiculous to charge that much, and here's 10 cents, and so that was how it was resolved, and they went that way. And actually, one of the guys that played minor baseball that I was coaching, Greg Long, who was sadly passed away of cancer just over a year ago. But Dad delivered Greg, and it was neat that I got to coach him for a number of years, and he became one of the principals in Hugh McKinnon Realty, and done a wonderful job of giving back to the community in so many ways. But Dad was paid 2 cords of wood for delivering Greg, so we often reminded him that Dad got way overpaid for that one.
Wow.
So it's been a neat community that I don't think had any sense of, at least certainly we didn't have any sense of people being different. We were all the same, and we all had roles to play, and all the roles that were of equal importance in participating in a community, and what a community showed.
Yeah. Well, hey, we're going to go ahead and take our commercial break here, Gordie, but we will be right back. So for our listeners, just hang on for a second. We'll be right back after the break, and we'll talk with Gordie about growing up in White Rock and some of his fondest memories. So hold on for just a minute, and we'll be right back.
More with Gordie Hogg after a word from our sponsors.
Shopping for the lowest mortgage rate? Looking to refinance?
Catch the Mortgage Newscast with Jared Dreyer
On the Business Channel.
On localwebradio.fm.
If you're struggling with a dental or oral health issue, be sure to catch the Healthy Smiles Oral Health Show with Dr. Norm Ickard on the Health Channel on localwebradio.fm.
Buying or selling a home on the Semiahmoo Peninsula? Catch up on local market conditions on This Week in Real Estate with Lance and Connie Marples from Sutton West Coast Realty on localwebradio.fm.
Now back to the Gordie Hogg Show.
All right, we're back with Gordie Hogg. Now, Gordie, as a school-age youngster, what was it like living on the peninsula?
It was a great place to live. In fact, in the winter, if you saw somebody that you didn't know or you didn't recognize, you usually would stop and say, "Hi, or are you visiting, or where are you from?" Because you usually knew everybody in the winter. In the summer, it was people from New Westminster and Vancouver, and lots of people coming to visit. So you knew things were a bit different there. But there were things like Boy Scouts. It was in knowing everybody in Cubs, and Mr. Whipple, who was our scout leader, and he had raised rabbits, going and visiting the rabbits and seeing all the rabbits, and seeing Mr. Whipple teaching us and teaching us about how to tie a knot and how to be involved in things. And where Semiahmoo Mall is now, the big development there, that's we used to go camping as Cub Scouts there and Boy Scouts in a place that's now a big mall. I remember on my friend Jim Mills, who lived on Clow Road, which is called, but it's now 156 out near King George Boulevard. And remember, Jim was a great fisherman, and we would see salmon swimming up the ditch in front of his house, which was always kind of amazing. And
wow!
So, yeah, and there was Mr. Brown who taught square dancing, and we used to go to square dancing, and that was at the Dolphins, which was on the pier, and a restaurant, and that we took square dancing in as kids, and it burnt down in I think the late 60s, and so there isn't anything on the pier like that now, but certainly that was a place we grew up with, and we'd be at the beach during the summer every day and learning how to swim, and lots of people who were great teachers, and Mrs. Merle McGrath, who was taught teaching on the beach under the big umbrella, and everybody in the community grew up through that. And when you got to be good enough, you could go out to the tank at the end of the pier, and if you were able to swim the 25 yards of the tank, then you got your little certificate, and you were able to go out to the end of the pier by yourself. That was always a big ritual, to be able to work your way through. I can swim. I got big enough now, and I'm old enough to go to the end of the pier and be a part of that.
Almost like a
rite of passage. Or take the train from White Rock to Yeah, it certainly was, yeah. And taking the train from White Rock to Vancouver and paying like 30 cents to be able to go on that. Or remember when our allowance, I used to get my allowance, and sometimes I'd walk through on the tracks from White Rock to Blaine, Washington. And because our dollar was worth 10 cents more than the U.S. dollar, so I could spend more. And we used to actually walk right on the rail. We got pretty good. Doug Young and David Berryman and others, we'd get really good at walking right on the rail and being able to walk right through the border, never stop at the border at the customs and immigration. But we could stand on that rail and jump from one rail to another, and just had a wonderful time walking along there. Of course, if you tried to do that now, it would be a national incident or an international incident of some sort.
Sure,
It's a whole different world in that sense. But certainly it was lots of fun doing that and going there and having fish and chips on Marine Drive. And it was just a neat place to grow up. Semiahmoo Park, the Semiahmoo First Nations, which have been such an integral part of our community. It's called the Semiahmoo Peninsula, named after Semiahmoo First Nations. Our Semiahmoo High School, it was named after. And I believe the first president of a students' council, First Nations president of a students' council in Canada, was Grand Chief Bernard Charles at Semiahmoo High School. And he was elected in a public school. We elected a First Nations person as the president of the Students' Council. I think that says a lot about Bernard in particular, but certainly about the community as well.
Wow.
So there's lots of wonderful and neat experiences. Even Charlie McLaren, who I mentioned earlier, who had the drugstore. I remember later when I got married and in the 70s, and Christmas Eve, he would phone me if I hadn't been shopping there, because I did all my Christmas shopping at Charlie McLaren's drugstore. He said, "You better get down here, Gord, I'm closing." So I remember rushing down there, and my wife, Laverne, always wondered why she had all of these things from a drugstore for Christmas presents, but it was the good judgment of Charlie who guided me through all of those things. So there was lots of people looking after each other. There was the A&W restaurant, which has been gone for years and years, but it was at the foot of Habagut and Marine Drive. And when we got old enough to drive, everybody met at the A&W, and there was the Park Theater that was just around the corner from there. And remember the first show I saw there was like the Goldilocks and the Three Bears. And I can remember sitting in the front row and seeing these giant bears on the screen and being so frightened by that. And there was one bus that would drive along Marine Drive out to Ocean Park, back along North Bluff, and back around. And so we would, I think we paid 10 cents to be able to ride around that. But it was neat to be on the bus with everybody who'd gone to see the show. And the Petroviches who ran the show, I can remember them. They were always tried to discipline us, because apparently we weren't always as well behaved as we should be. But they always had a flashlight, and they'd shine the flashlight on if you were talking during a show. And sometimes we even got thrown out talking too much during a show. But those were all part of the rituals. The artesian well in Semiahmoo Park that would be bubbling forth with water, and we go over there to have a drink of this beautiful fresh water. And I remember the first time that Larry Wilson and I were at the artesian well, and we heard this noise over in the grass. We went over there, and we thought we'd found a dead person laying there, but it turned out it was a guy who was older than us who had been drinking too much and had passed out. And Harry Davey, who lived across the street, came to rescue the poor guy out of the deep grass. So all those ways of living and learning and growing up were pretty special.
Well, Gordie, it's been great talking to you today and learning about your founding principles and the love you have for the community. Now, on our next episode, we are going to talk about the rich history of the area and the generations of families who are community builders. And who are some of these people? Now, for our listeners, as a reminder, if you need, you can reach Gordie on his website, and that's at www.gordonhoggmla.bc.ca, or you can always call his office at 604-542-3930. Now, Gordie, for myself, for the listeners, thanks so much for the incredible conversation today.
Oh, thank you very much, Erik. It's been a delight having you leading me those ways and finding out there are still a few memory cells left there that I can call upon to go through this. I feel very blessed and fortunate to have had that opportunity. So thank you so very much.
Absolutely. Have a great one.
Thanks, and to you too.
Thanks for listening. If you have an interesting story about growing up on the peninsula, please share it with us on our Facebook page at www.facebook.com/LWR Peninsula.
Local stories, local voices. We're localwebradio.fm.
This episode is a production of Jam Media. For information on hosting your own web radio show, visit jammedia.com. That's www.jambmedia.com.
The opinions expressed by our guest and host on localwebradio.fm do not necessarily reflect the views of Jam Media or its owners. No expressed or implied opinions of any product or service should be considered an endorsement or recommendation of any kind by Jam Media or its owners.